Hi Storytime friends, I'm Miss Kris from B.F. Jones Memorial Library, and today I'll be reading Questions and Feelings About Racism by Anita Ganeri. Grown-ups, be sure to stick around. At the end of our story time, we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Valerie Bass all about the importance of starting a conversation about racism with your kiddos at a young age. Questions and Feelings About Racism by Anita Ganeri. There are millions of people in the world. Every one of us is different. We look different. We wear different clothes. We speak different languages. We have different ways of living. We're good at different things. What makes you different? Even though we're all different, we're all human beings. We should value and respect everyone for who they are. We should treat everyone fairly and equally. Everyone should have the chance to live and work together happily and peacefully. How would you like people to treat you? Some people do not treat others fairly or equally. They treat them badly because they have different colored skin, come from different countries, speak different languages, or wear different clothes. This is called racism. It's a kind of bullying. Racism can mean saying unkind things to people. It can mean calling people names or making fun of the way they speak. It can mean teasing them about the way they look or dress. How would you feel if someone called you names? Racism can mean leaving someone out because they're different. It might mean not picking them for a game of soccer. It might mean leaving them to sit on their own at lunch. How would you feel if you were left out? Racism can mean taking a person's things. It might mean stealing their money. It might mean ruining their belongings. Racism can also mean hurting a person. The racist might push or shove them. They might hit them or trip them. Both children and adults can be racist. Children may see or hear their parents or other adults being racist and copy them. But it doesn't matter who is being racist. Racism is always wrong. It is never okay for anyone to say or do racist things. Racism makes people unhappy. It can make them feel unsafe and upset. It can make them scared to go to school or to leave their house. Racism can make people feel ashamed of who they are and what they look like and where they come from. What makes you upset? Why are some people racist? They may think that it's clever to be mean. They may think that they will be more popular if they say racist things. It may be that they feel afraid of people who are different. Often, racists don't even know the person they are being mean to. They don't take time to find out anything about them. They might think that people are strange because they wear different clothes. They do not understand that this is often a sign of their religion. In some schools, children come from lots of different countries. Some left their homes because their lives were in danger. Some lost their families. But other children may not take time getting to know them. If someone is racist to you, don't keep it to yourself. Tell your parents, teacher, or another adult you trust. Your parents or family could come into school to talk to your class. They could help other children understand things better. Who would you tell? Everyone is different, and that is a very good thing. Imagine how boring life would be if everyone was exactly the same. We can learn a lot from each other. We can learn about different countries, different religions, and different ways of life. We can learn to live together peacefully and happily. Thanks for reading the story with me. Now, stick around for a special discussion with Dr. Valerie Bass about having a conversation with your children about racism and teaching them about diversity.
Hi, my name is Dr. Valerie Bass. I'm an assistant professor of youth and social innovation at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm actually a developmental psychologist. What does that mean? I study and conduct research with children and youth. I'm interested in making sure they have the best opportunities to grow and thrive. So I'm thrilled to be a guest speaker at Storytime with you to talk about issues of race and identity as well as diversity, because those are areas that I study. I take a look at how do we ensure that children have the best opportunities in spite of racism and in spite of the lack of diversity that many of our children, Black, white, Latino, Asian, all experience when they're going into schools and living in particular communities. So I'm happy to talk to you today about both racism, diversity, and how do we begin to have these conversations at an early age with young children. And I can tell you that I do have a young child at home, so I'm speaking from experience. Racism is when a group of people in power have a bias and or prejudice toward another group of people, and they use their power to prevent those other groups of people from having access to equal opportunities to education, employment, compensation, housing, all these different areas, how the laws are applied. It's important for us to have conversations with children at a young age about racism because they become aware of differences very early on, and they adopt behaviors that they see modeled at home and school as well as in houses of worship and other social spaces. So we can begin to have a conversation with them early about differences and biases and prejudice that actually hold other people back or prevent them from having access to opportunities. Then they can become aware of those biases, and that can be a part, that conversation, that discourse, that awareness can become a part of their day-to-day experiences as well as their educational experiences very early on. Children as early as 2 and 3 become aware of racial differences as well as biases that we hold as parents and caregivers and teachers. They can tell when teachers prefer boys over girls or girls over boys. They can tell when teachers prefer a particular kind of behavior. And because social acceptance is so important, particularly at kindergarten and first grade, oftentimes those children do whatever they can do to be in that favored position. So it's actually a good time to begin talking about racism and racial bias. And there are lots of books that are there at an early digestible age that we can have that conversation with children. Diversity is when you have a community with different people, different gender, different size, different shape, different color. And an easy way to think about diversity with young people, think about the different shapes. Children are already learning about diversity. There's triangles, there's a diamond rhombus, which is my daughter's favorite. There's the infamous octagon, which is the stop sign. They recognize that even when they can't spell STOP. There's circles, they're squares, they're rectangles, so they're aware of diversity in other spaces. They know that there are different kinds of vegetables. Some are green, some are orange, some are yellow. They don't like them all. So children are aware of different kinds of diversity And what we can then do is begin to talk about racial and ethnic and gender diversity that exists in different communities. Even if we don't have that existence in our communities, we can begin to expose children to different kinds of diversities through what we show them and demonstrate on television and cartoons, even in the toys that they select when you're toy shopping, and definitely books. We think about classic stories and classic fairy tales which really omit ethnic and racial diversity. But if we can choose books and bring home books into our library and check out of the public library, books that include diverse characters, we can have that conversation. So children are already learning about differences at the dinner table, different kinds of vegetables, different shapes, different sizes, different flavor, different texture, different colors, orange, yellow, white, green, light green, dark green, crunchy, soft. They're learning about differences and diversity already in other categories of life, different kinds of clothes, different seasons, fall, winter, spring, summer. So you can begin to talk about diversity by thinking about what they're already learning, what they're already exposed to, and what are the benefits of spring. What do you like about spring? What do you like about fall? What do you like about winter? Think of all that diversity and use that as a way to introduce a conversation about living and sharing a life, a community, being part of a community where you have different racial, ethnic, gender groups. Groups of people living together, and why it's important for that diversity is important for our community and healthy for our community. Think about different vegetables. They're healthy for us, right? Different shapes do different things. We know that circles create wheels, and wheels allow us to ride our bike. They allow us to ride skates as well as to drive our cars and trucks. So I do think if you think about the ways that young children are already learning about diversity in different elements of their life, you can follow that up with conversations about the importance of diversity of people and how we all bring value and assets to where we live and make our community stronger. I hinted at this a little bit when I talked about diversity. So if you want to have this conversation with your children, there are lots of things to pull from. First and foremost, figuring out where you stand on racism and diversity and doing some homework. So if you live in a relatively homogenous town or area of town where you don't see a lot of people who look different from you or have different morals and different values, you might need to read up on differences in communities, differences in people, even different communities in your neighborhood. What about the toys that your children have at home? What about the lessons that are coming home from school? Our history books haven't done the best job of really presenting a true perspective of the making of America, all the contributions of different people in terms of making America the country that it is. And so that may require you to pull out some books from the library or from the bookstore that tell a more cohesive or comprehensive story, or finding out about other groups of people you wouldn't ordinarily look into. You know, we often go to what's familiar, what we're used to, so we might need to go and find those things out. So for example, if your child is learning about Abraham Lincoln, they should also be learning about Frederick Douglass. And if they're learning about Frederick Douglass, they definitely should be learning about Harriet Tubman. So if those are people, historical figures who've had an impact on our country that you're not familiar with, you may need to go ahead and do some research, pull out some of the age-appropriate books, so those stories become part of your conversation after you start to talk about diversity and racism. Thank you for having me. Feel free to contact me. Kristen knows where to find me. And happy storytelling, happy creating stories. And I wish you the very best with having these wonderful, colorful conversations with young children about racism, about race and identity and diversity. Have a great day. Be safe, laugh, and dance every day.